for a good 10, 15 years, 15 years at least, uh, I've been contemplating writing a book, and I've been developing a book proposal on and off, doing other shit too, like ending my career in academia and stuff. But working up a book proposal, pitching a book proposal, don't exactly have a publisher, for a book called The Tragedy of the Left. I think the history of the left in the 20th century specifically is extremely disturbing. Okay, and this is not because I'm a right winger, all right? It's not only was the left of the 20th century a failure by the standards of their own ideals, but they had a entire series of ideologies that guaranteed that their success would be their failure. Okay? That in pursuing egalitarianism and liberation, they specifically endorsed hierarchy and authoritarianism. Hierarchy and authoritarianism. Yeah, so, or let's try this. The goals they aimed at, which I endorse completely, ecstatically. I would like to be a left winger. A much higher degree of economic equality. All right, let's try that as a first flourish. A sense of a cooperative, collective, okay? Maybe this is not my specific temperament, collectivism, but the idea that we're social beings and that it's not about, it's not only about individuals, all that's pretty good, okay? So this is the tragedy of the left. And it is a tragedy in the sense, like there's a tragic flaw, right? Or a screeching contradiction at the very heart of the whole fucking thing, all right? At least since the end of anarchism as a viable left-wing alternative, which is around 19 teens. There's been a revival of anarchism. I think people haven't really dealt with this problem. If David Graeber is associated with the left, if Noam Chomsky is associated with the left, they've got a serious problem, man, and they should be dissidents in the left. They must be. Okay, or they're completely inconsistent in their anarchism, which they've got problems along those lines, Chomsky and Graeber, because they're heavily identified left. And that's the primary identification. Well, that's going to suck you into authoritarianism so bad, statism. I don't see how you can be an anti-authoritarian and identify with the left over the last 100-some years. Okay? So, I'll do a little biography. And I'll do a little conceptual work in this video. I don't know if this is going to be a series. I've got a book proposal and stuff. I don't know. I guess I'm sort of messing around writing the book. Reading the whole history of Marxism, for one thing. I've been doing that for years, too. People might not know that about me. Okay. Which is really fascinating. All right, so this is what I would say. I was raised on the left. My mother's parents were Communist Party members. Right? My grandfather's first wife, my grandmother, was a founder of the Grey Panthers. My grandfather's second wife, Thyra Edwards, was a black communist activist. in Chicago and New York, and then actually in Europe too. And my mother and my stepfather sort of waffle between, sort of mainstream leftism, liberalism, and something much more radical. They were both, my mother and my stepfather were very interested in the communist revolution in the 60s. Lionized Mao. Taught that to me too. But meanwhile, actually participating in American electoral politics in a pretty mainstream way, basically voting Democratic and everything. So I don't want to exaggerate my mother and my stepfathers. I've experienced them as Marxists around 70. They were high school teachers, and they both taught out of Marx in their disciplines, history and anthropology. Or at least they thought that was essential. And I mean, I'm not saying it's not. So I guess I started with a bunch of leftist ideals, and I was kind of a precocious little intellectual fucker. And, I was reading Marx in 7th grade and shit like this, okay? And Marxism. And the whole history of communism, actually. Trying to, right? It's not, I don't know where my understanding was pretty primitive. Okay, obviously. Rudimentary, with not a lot of historical ballast and shit. But one thing I really noticed very quickly as I took up Marx and declared myself to be a Marxist and stuff was that state authority was going to be the solution. My most basic political impulse, and maybe one of my most basic human impulses, sort of on a par with sex and shit like this, food, is anti-authoritarianism. Like, if you are, I tried to destroy the schools I was in and shit like this because I usually regard authority as completely illegitimate and arbitrary and irrational. All right. Well, there's no place for me in the left, right? Not that anymore, I don't think. So I guess one thing I was really, I was in almost a little crisis about was how could my grandparents, for example, with the ideals they had for human liberation, endorse Joseph Stalin? Okay, or I'll take the Russian Revolution pre-Stalin. Okay, totalitarianism. How could my beautiful grandparents endorse totalitarianism? How did they get to that? What was the process by which you go from egalitarian, a basic egalitarian intuition, to the most extreme versions of political hierarchy that have ever been attempted? Soviet Union, Communist China, etc. All right. How do decent egalitarian people endorse the forced collectivization of agriculture? Okay, what the fuck, man? Are the show trials, and they did. That's your egalitarianism? So, how did people get to the point of endorsing, well, first of all, straight up evil, but then also endorsing something that contradicted their entire belief system, if you ask me, and their entire sort of decency as human beings? Right? How did you get to the point of saying, oh, that makes sense? How did you get to the point of defending totalitarian systems all over the world and totalitarian procedures? My parents loved the fucking Cultural Revolution. Excuse me, man. On an egalitarian basis? So I mean, as I think about the book, it's going to be like sort of vignettes, although, hopefully very research informed vignettes of, different moments, key moments the, of leftist authoritarianism. From Marx's Communist Manifesto to, Zizek and Jameson, Frederick Jameson. Like, these people are, I mean, they're really straight up totalitarians, okay? And people experience like Jameson's straight up totalitarianism. Like, I'll prove this if you like, as deeply inspiring, transformative, and shit like this. If the left, as configured like that, wins, all its ideals lose. Now that is tragedy, I think. And it's also almost impossible to imagine. Like, if you prescribe means to realize an end, and the means are obviously incompatible with the end, if you pursue the means, the end becomes impossible or recedes continuously. Like, what are you doing? Like, that's an amazing dilemma that billions of people have fallen into. Like, endorsing authoritarian means for liberatory ends. That's real simple. Endorsing authoritarian means for liberational ends is a ridiculous procedure, but the whole fucking left is there, man, since the end of anarchism or whatever, okay? So I'll just say, like, if you want to understand what leftism is, I don't think the left-right spectrum actually makes any sense in general, but if you were trying to figure out what leftism is, it's informed by Marx fundamentally throughout, okay? In its real extreme versions, like, Cultural Revolution versions, and in its real mild versions, like its electoral politics versions, You can't think this without Marx. That the left is Marxish, right? Which I'm not saying that every leftist is a Marxist or something like that. Of course not. I'm saying that Marx fundamentally, and like Marxist analysis, pictures of history, Marxist economic analyses and everything is absolutely fundamental, even whether people know it or not, to the whole sort of socialist left and even, more mild versions than that. Right? And, like, read the Communist Manifesto. It's got a 10-point plan. Like, he says, I should read this. Probably. Okay, well, I'll talk it through instead of plucking my book, I guess. We can't say exactly what the revolutionary procedures will be in each situation or in each nation, or whatever, we, Marx and Engels. What we can say is that it'll probably look like this 10 things. The state, organized as a dictatorship of the proletariat, try to work that out for a while, okay? Will control communication, transportation, right? Education, etc., etc., etc. Banking, finance, manufacturing, agriculture. All sectors of the society will be controlled by the state. They say that straightforwardly, okay? Of course, the anarchists in the late 19th century knew that extremely well and called Marxists authoritarian socialists, which is extremely apropos. Bakunin knew this about Marx. Every honest person knew this about Marx. He made it completely explicit. So if you're sitting there and going like, no, Marx is not authoritarian, like real Marxists never, well, I will prove it, dude. 17 times. Okay. Marx was more opposed to anarchism than he was opposed to capitalism, dude. He devoted book after book to destroying anarchism on the grounds that we're going to have a violent, hierarchical society to achieve the transformations that we envision. All right. And, you know, so like the flavors of leftism from mainstream to radical, all about statism. There's no solution in the leftist arsenal that's not a government program. For real. Like socialism, what is socialism? It's state control of the economy, okay? So, I mean, I'm interested in any kind of leftism that we can do without statism. But I think that leftism and statism have been so totally bound up for so long that there's no extricating them. And so, like, you know, don't be a leftist, dude, because that's totalitarianism, okay? But what beautiful ideals, man, okay? Yeah, much more economic equality would be much better. All right, now, you cannot create a kind of total state hierarchy and use that as a tool to nurture an egalitarian society. That makes no fucking sense. Okay, if you're a statist, a hypnotized statist, like all Marxists or whatever, and all leftists basically, you endorse a hierarchy of power as extreme as it's possible to imagine practically in a human context. That is state power. You start with, the state. That is the monopoly of violence in the hands of certain people. A power hierarchy that structures the whole society. Well, guess what? After you distribute the power in this incredibly asymmetric way to the party or whatever, I don't know, to the government, however you get them all that power, all the distribution, I'll take Rawls out with this too, the distribution of all other goods will reflect the power hierarchy. Access to all other goods will reflect the power hierarchy. And if there's no means of redress, if there's no further revolution that destroys this state or whatever, it'll persist indefinitely as a hierarchy in the distribution of every single good. And so that's what leftism endorses. That's what Marx endorses. Hierarchical distribution of every single good. Now, do you think that is compatible with leftist egalitarianism? Some things don't even need to be refuted. Like, this is some pathetic fucking bullshit, dudes, okay? Now, I'm not going to necessarily go that direction. I want a reasoned argument here. Marx's own view, of course, is that once you concentrate all power and wealth in the hands of the state, it will wither away. Because the class system will be destroyed by the dictatorship of the proletariat, and then the state will wither away. So if we create the most powerful states that could ever be imagined, that is the way to eliminate the state. Come on, man. And you cannot get hundreds of thousands and millions and billions of people to agree to these flat contradictions, man. Like it's, and okay, then after that, it's mumbo jumbo. Okay, so then we need like incredible swaths of ideological bullshit to disguise the obvious fundamental truth that we are recommending extreme hierarchy even though we endorse extreme equality. Now, I don't think there's any way to do worse in political theory than that. And so I'm sitting here wondering why we got 200 years of Marxism coming up in 20 years, I guess. Why leftism looked like this for 150 years with this grotesque contradiction at its heart that vitiates its program and makes it impossible of realization. That's a bad situation, leftists. So figure that out, or ditch the leftism, or ditch the left-right spectrum in general. There was an anti-authoritarian left, as I indicated, people like Bakunin and Kropotkin and Emma Goldman, and they were reading Marx, and they needed Marxist economic analysis. They used it. But by the time of the Russian Revolution, or maybe at that moment, as Trotsky and Lenin argued against any kind of democratic or much less anarchist solutions, anarchism dissolved as a element in the left. Maybe it was 50-50 in 1890, okay? But it was 95-5 by 1950. I guess, we got a little outbreak in the Spanish Civil War. Bakunin knew this, and Marx knew this. The differences between anarchism and Marxism are total. Okay? The differences are fundamental. They can't be allied. And this is something that I really want to emphasize to you, Noam Chomsky, and to you, late David Graeber. You can't sort of vaguely ally yourself with a totalitarian left. Like, you're not on the same side, man. Not if you're an anti-authoritarian of any sort whatsoever. Not if you're egalitarian, even vaguely sincerely endorsing those values. So, leftism was an amazing mess, dude. Like a grotesque tissue of contradictions. And yet, I totally want to endorse their goals and ideals. So what the fuck can I do? I don't know, man, but I'm going to try. But first of all, we got to clear up this jive, man. Like, come on, man. That is really some sad-ass bullshit for a very long time. All right, so that's the first installment in that, I guess. I don't know if this will be a series or what I'll do with this. Maybe I'll run through my book outline doing different, moments in leftism as totalitarianism blossomed and anti-authoritarianism was eliminated.